She thought she had finally found her person. They attended church together, they were baptized together. Her students were even planning the wedding. She was certain she knew how the story would end. Then, 1 week after baptism, everything fell apart. What followed was a season of heartbreak, surrender, healing, and learning one of life's most difficult lessons. Sometimes God asks us to put down the pen and trust Him to write a better story than the one we imagined for ourselves. How many years have you spent treating yourself like a problem to solve instead of someone to understand? We've been taught to push through, ignore the signals, silence our emotions, and distrust our intuition. But what if your body isn't standing in the way of the life you're longing for? What if it's been trying to guide you there all along? I help women stop reacting from old patterns and start responding with clarity, confidence, and intention. Together, we uncover what's keeping them stuck so they can communicate more effectively, build healthier relationships, and flourish in life and leadership. Maybe your next level doesn't require more striving. Maybe it simply begins by learning to listen. If you're ready to become all you were created to be, visit itsyourstorytotell.com and get to know Megan and the other available coaches today. Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast. I'm your host, Megan Babcock. This podcast is a place where we pull back the curtain on the hard parts of life, not because pain defines us, but because redemption does. Every person has a story, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters are written after the pages we never wanted to live through. Today, I'm honored to welcome Tennille Martinez. She's an educator, a writer, a podcaster, and a woman of faith whose journey through unexpected heartbreak led her into a deeper relationship with God, a greater understanding of her identity in Christ, and a calling to help others heal in the middle of their own stories. Tennille, welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast.
Thank you, Megan, for having me. It is an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about my story. Something I love absolutely is stories. So your podcast,
we have a lot in common there.
Yes, your podcast is aptly named. I love it.
I'm going to let you take us back to wherever it is you want to start telling your story.
Well, this story happened not the way I expected when I met my person, the person that was the catalyst, the person that God used, because that's how I see it now. And when I look back, when we first met, everything was great. He took me to church. I didn't have a home church. And I was visiting a few churches around here. Didn't find any that I liked. So I just stuck to watching church on TV. But it's not the same. It's not the same. So when I met him and he took me to his church, a Spanish church, no less, and my Spanish is okay, but not enough to carry conversations the way that I carry now. My Spanish has improved immensely. Sermons in Spanish. And so when I got there and I was immersed in this, I was like, oh, it felt like home. That was the first indication. And they were from all different places. So when you're Latina, it's different countries, different ways of saying things, different food, different customs. The only thing we have, and mostly, is the language with certain words that are a little different, but I felt like I was home and I was shocked. It's like I would have never selected this on my own. So as we continued in the relationship, it started to become rocky and not so great. At a whim, I decided to get baptized. Never in all of my life, adult life, did I think of getting baptized because I was born Catholic, was baptized as a baby. And I was like, oh, that's okay. It's good enough. And when they were making calls for the baptism, I was like, I want to do it. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't something like, oh, let me think about this. And it's like, I knew immediately that this is what I wanted in my life. And we, at that point, were extremely rocky. At one point, I didn't know if he was going to get baptized. And we ended up there, same day, baptized. And a week later, the relationship completely dissolves. We continue to attend the same church together. Not going to tell you how that felt.
I'm sure we can all imagine it was not the most comfortable uncomfortable
No.
place to be. So what made you stay in that situation?
Church was family. It was.
Mm.
It's this church has a specific mentoring program that when I was talking to the pastor, I started to realize that certain things I needed to confront, to tackle, to process in order to heal, because it was spilling into this relationship and we both had things we needed to heal, but I was more active in tackling it. So I joined the mentorship program. I joined a Bible study. They would have a weekly Bible study in people's homes that were hosted, and started doing that, and slowly immersed myself in this church that felt like family. And I had a mentor and then my Bible study teacher, who is now like a sister. These relationships that I formed with these women that pretty much supported me during this time when I was hurting, when I was trying to heal. It's like when you fall, when you're a kid and you fall off your bike, you scab your knee, and every time you bend your knee, that scab lifts up and it hurts, and then it starts to heal again, and then something else scratches it and then it hurts again. That was this whole process last year. So that's why I stayed. A part of me always believed that the Lord could redeem it, the Lord can restore it. And as I continued on my walk and saw how God sees me, how God loves me, it was no longer that was good enough. I wasn't. And having faith that the Lord has something so much more for me, destined for my life, that relationship couldn't fill. Yeah.
I can see how sometimes when we stay in a situation that's really uncomfortable, that God can use that to find us, to allow us to bump up against those things that are still kind of hidden below the surface. When I was in a very unhealthy marriage, I was making a decision to leave. I had attempted to leave multiple times, but it was always out of anger, or you did this to me, so I'm going to leave. God convicted me that I was contributing to the toxicity in this relationship. He told me to go back into it, which is not advice when you're in a very unhealthy, abusive, even relationship that is given without knowing that you've heard from God. Like, that should never be something somebody tells you to do, because I had a lot of things in the church, advice and things that I followed that was not very healthy and actually created more harm. But in this instance, I knew that God was telling me to go back into this relationship. He was clear. He was like, it's not necessarily to save your marriage, but it is to save you. And as he had started this work in me, I started to realize like there were so many things that were unhealthy in me. I didn't know how to have boundaries. I didn't know how to communicate my needs very effectively, hence running, trying to avoid people pleasing, all of these different character traits that I had developed over time. I can look in my family's past, see these things are patterns that we have passed down, and he was wanting to break that off. But I couldn't do it outside of the situation because I needed to know, okay, I'm different because I respond different. I'm standing grounded in my identity and who Jesus says I am and the boundaries that I'm having. It is not punishment. It's out of love and truth, grace. So I can kind of see how maybe God was keeping you had protection. You had people who were supporting you, because that's the other part that's really important, is having that support when you're trying to go through something like this, especially if you're in the presence of the person.
Yes.
But how did that experience help to transform you?
Well, when you were talking about running away, I was a notorious runner. Anytime I faced a situation that was uncomfortable, that I just didn't want to deal with, I didn't want to deal with it, so I would run. And that was in past relationships, that was in issues with family. The only thing I never ran away from was my career, work. I stuck it through
See,
there.
I think I ran to that
Yes.
because it was a place that I felt validated
Yes.
and it gave me worth. And so I worked really, really hard for
Mm-hmm.
that. And so it was still a running.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yes.
just that it was working for me because I got the validation that I
Right.
wasn't getting over here in my relationships, but then I was getting burnt out because I
Yes.
also still didn't have boundaries
No
over
boundaries.
there.
Same.
And they loved
Same.
that because they're like, oh, she'll say yes. Go ask her. Like she'll take it on.
Oh yes. And that was what happened during most of my breakups when I went through my divorce over a decade ago. Same thing. I threw myself into my work, and that is where I went to survive. Now, when I wanted to run away from the church, because I did. There were times that, I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm just going to leave. Why am I subjecting myself to this? That was the question a lot of the times. And my Bible study teacher sat me down, my big sis sat me down and said, if you do not face this situation, if you do not heal this situation and you run, you are going to repeat this same thing over again somewhere else. Because until you master this, until you actually conquer this, and she goes, and it's not of your strength. You're trying to do it of your strength. You have to go to the Father. And it took me, and I'm getting chills now as we speak because I'm thinking about it. It took me so long to understand that. There was another incident, and I heard audibly from the Lord, this is your church. You have to stay. And as I continue this walk, I'm hearing He speaks to me through the Word. He speaks through me through people. He speaks to me through social media. Like I was angry and Exodus 14:14, that He is going to fight my battles. Relax. If I continued the same pattern, I was not going to, again, heal that wound, really go into that root of that wound that started way back when. It wasn't even him. Like I said, he was the catalyst. He's the one that jump-started my healing. And I have to be thankful to him for that, even though it took me a lot to say that. I have to continue to forgive him for what happened and how it happened, and in order for me to grow, because this isn't even about him. It is about me. It's about my healing. It's about what do I want to show my family, my students, my community, the people that read my essays on Substack, the people that listen to my podcast. I want them to know that the healing is there. It's available to all. This is not just because I'm blessed. Yes, I am blessed, but I also made an intentional and active decision to do this. That is the premise of this story, because I'm the protagonist in my story and I'm the main character, not the main character energy we see on social media, but the main character in this story that the Lord is writing. And I have to trust Him with the pen and stop trying to steal it away from Him. And I'm going to write it because I can tell you some stories in the past year where I tried to steal the pen, and did I feel it? I hurt my own feelings, not the person. I hurt my own feelings because I got word, don't do it. And, me being human and fleshly, I tried and attempted and paid for it.
Yeah, definitely been there. I'm sure listeners can identify with that, because while we were created in the image of God, we also have a sin nature. There's always a pull between the two, and it's where are you going to align? And you said something so key, and it was you made an intentional choice.
Yes.
When we're breaking cycles, it will not happen if we're not intentional.
Right.
And for so long in my life, I had just been existing, talking about God is good all the time and speaking scripture over my life. I wanted a life filled with love, connection, joy, fulfillment, and it looked nothing of the sort. I remember getting to the end of myself, and because I was so desperate, I don't recommend, waiting to surrender until you are desperate. But unfortunately, that happens often in a lot of people's story. It was in that place that He helped me to understand that there was programming that was going on in my life until I looked at why I was living a life that I didn't want. and face the reality, like the truth. I wanted to make it look like success, but until I got real and honest with myself, much less everybody else, first I had to just acknowledge where I was at. And then God showed me how to take the very next step. And I would love it if He would give the entire plan, like, here's the blueprint and here it is. And it's like, no, He said, I will be a lamp unto your path, like to your feet, just your feet. That's all you get. You do not get the whole path illuminated for you. I think that's hard when you've experienced trauma in your life. And for me, I wasn't even acknowledging that there were things in my past, even though I had been sexually assaulted and had some really hard things. I was not wanting to look at those things, much less the patterns that they created, because I just wanted to move on from it. But it doesn't work that way, does it? Can't just deny it, move on, keep going. You have to really spend time with it and get to the root of, why am I even choosing these types of relationships?
Right. Why am
I showing up in work this way, you know, because I'm tired and yet I don't know how to say no. Understanding what's below that is where we can actually transform our life, because behavior modification does not work long term. It only works until crash again.
Right. And that's correct. And it's like, again, it's going back to that point of doing it from your own will. That's where we fail. And just to go back to something you said, because I remember wishing, why can't you just tell me what the plan is? Tell me what the plan is. Tell me how this ends. So that way I can just relax and just keep moving forward and working. Again, the lamp only lights at your feet. That's all we need. We have to have faith and continue to take that step. And it reminds me, as a teacher, when I have kids and we're like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do this lesson? They don't see the bigger picture. I know what's going to happen at the end of the school year. I know what they need to know by the end. By January, they need to know this. By April, they need to know this. By June, they need to know this. If I were to tell them, you need to know all of this from day one, they would shut down. And that's what God does for us. He doesn't give us the whole blueprint. We would suffocate just knowing. We would feel like we were underwater, drowning, with the amount of responsibility, pressure, expectation that would come from something like that. That's where we have to, again, trust our author, again, trust the little tiny puzzle piece we have in our hand, and continue that walk forward, knowing that everything is going to unfold the way it's supposed to. We just have to walk in faith and obedience, because that's another one, the obedience.
Well, what God showed me about obedience is the level to which you will obey is the level of which you actually have faith. Because if I can't be obedient, it's because there's a lack of trust in what I'm being asked to do. And I was like, oh, you're right. I mean, I know that's true. What has been really cool about this journey is I used to think, oh, God is just ready to pounce on you. Like, I want to point out what you're doing wrong and I'm going to give you a consequence. And that was the enemy who was making me believe that about God's character.
Yes.
But when I've started to learn His voice, not the enemy, His voice is kind, it is convicting, but it's not condemning.
Right.
And so there's a peace that I have experienced when there has been a revelation about something, even if it was an ugly truth about how I was living my life. There was a relief that now that I see it, now that I know better, I can do better, because my heart is to love and to serve God.
Yes.
But if I don't know where I'm falling short, I actually can't live up to my desired outcome, to the mission and the purpose of my life. And so I can now rest in Him revealing to me an area of my life that needs to be worked on. That also came from knowing my identity, which I had to know Him and I had to know who He truly was before I could be anchored in that. Because if you're not anchored in your identity, that you are loved, that you are worthy, that there is nothing that God doesn't already know, right, about our story, then I was so fearful of disappointing people and not measuring up. I needed this validation externally because I wasn't able to be grounded in who I was and who God said I was. And so it was a lot of learning and going back to reprogram what I learned in 4 years old flannel graph of stories of the Bible to really start understanding him at a deeper level.
Yes. And I agree with you. What happened to me over the past year was that I developed intimacy with God. I developed a relationship with God because I've always been a believer. It's not that I grew up Catholic. I went to church every so often. As I got older, I was called, like I would gravitate towards going to a sermon here or there, watching it online, but also fearing God because I didn't know his voice. I didn't know his character. And I remember I have my Bible. I've had my Bible for years. And in 2020, I was reading Isaiah. I just felt so convicted and I felt we are so bad. That's what I kept thinking. And just like how I would tell my students, annotate your text and do this, interact with it, I would interact and I had no words. So I would put symbols, sad face, broken heart, sad face, broken heart. And I could not see the good at all in that piece of text, 2020, 2021. Because I didn't have a relationship with God. It was still at a distance. I still had him over here and I was over here. And I read Isaiah last year, not all of it, chapters, and I saw my annotations. And I'm reading this and I said, I don't feel the same way reading this. I see God's love. I see God's compassion. I see his unhappiness with our decisions because I could see myself in that text and I was like, oh, I did that. But if you continue to read, he gives you your steps. He tells you, I want to be gracious to you. I want to show you compassion, but you can't keep doing this over here because you're not going to get over here. And I'm telling you this for your own benefit. And it's just like a parent who tells a child, I'm not a parent, but I'm a teacher and I've been around children my entire life. And when your parent, considering it's a good and healthy relationship or semi-healthy, dysfunctional, functional, when the parent corrects the child, the parent's not trying to be mean. The parent's not hating the child. And that's how I felt when I read Isaiah 2020, 2021 era. Now in this era, I see the correction done out of love. I see that to be obedient, follow the rules. I wasn't a bad child, but I was very confrontational, a little bit rebellious, not to the point that I would do anything I want, but this mouth, oh my gosh. Transformation is all I have to say. But it's like it's that corrective love. And just to touch upon it, because this is what happened last year, and everyone knows my Isaiah 30 situation story. And what happened with Isaiah 30 was I was at church. The Lord told me not to do something. The Lord told me, don't do it. Don't do what you're about to do. And because I had this conversation, I had prayed about it. I journaled about it and all of these things. That day, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to let that person come up to me. The person started exiting the church. I was like, oh no. Okay, Lord, if you don't stop me right now, I'm going to go. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, he didn't stop me. I ran back there and inserted myself into a conversation with a particular person. And I'm sure you could figure out who it was. And based on the story. So that person was not receptive to the conversation. So I was like, oh my God, rejected again, heartbroken again, crying again. And I'm there. My mentor's like, why'd you do that? I was like, because I felt like so you know more than God. Okay. All right. And I was there crying and she's like, okay, let's stop. Let's pull it together. Crying at the altar again for the 900th time. I get home and I cried all the way home in the car, got home, still crying. I just opened up my Bible and I was like, I'm going to read something. I get to Isaiah 30 and it starts, woe to the rebellious children that do not listen. I stopped crying right then and there, because he told me not to do it. But because I wanted to pull the pen out of his hand again and wanted to go ahead and write the story that, I knew better. Instead of being obedient and following what my dad was telling me to do, decided to do this and hurt my own feelings. And I had to read there. And there was a part where I felt convicted. I was like, I was wrong. I was wrong for what I did. He was trying to protect me. I jumped in the line of traffic in front of the car that was moving full steam ahead. And when I get to a part that he says in Isaiah 30, and I don't know the verse, but I know he says that he longs to be gracious to us. So I felt like that caress, like, I know you messed up. I don't hate you, Tennille. I'm not happy with you, but I would long to be gracious. This is the way. I don't want to misquote the verse, but that's all of Isaiah 30 because I read it several times because I had to remember and remind myself that this is the way, and his way is so much better than my way. So he wants to be gracious to us. He wants us to follow his directions because he knows more than us. He created us. He knows the entire
and he sees all the things going on, right? Not just me, but the other person and the people in my life. And he knows how to move us and protect us. So thank you for sharing that. And the thing that I hear in what we're talking about is needing to get curious about what is it that he's trying to show us.
Right.
And you shared when we were talking before coming on the podcast about how God helped you reframe a question you were asking. So let's tell the listeners what that is, and then we're going to get more into how we go through that process of reframing in order to break through what it is that's keeping you stuck. What was that kind of switch in your thinking?
So, like with anything, and if we think about if you have children and they're 2 years old or 3, and let's say they want the cookie. I want a cookie, I want a cookie, I want a cookie. They're just focusing on what they want. And the parent says no. And they're like, why? And you tell them, why? Then they keep asking, but why not? And they continue, why, until they have a full-on tantrum. And then they never get to the question of for what. And that is where I was. And I'll explain how that all came about. During this whole process, I was like, why can't he just do this? Why can't we just get together? Why can't we just talk? Why can't we just figure this out? Why? And it first targeted to him. Then it was targeted to myself in the most ugliest of ways. And I'm going to be completely honest because you start to question, why can't he love? Why can't he choose me? What is wrong with me? Why am I so unlovable? And then you go to God, and why God? Why, if you brought him into my life, why did it not work out? Why is it this? And it was a constant why. And I would shift from why about him, why about myself, and then why to God. And between my mentor and between my Bible study teacher, my big sis, and she especially, I love her, but if you want someone direct and just and she means it in the best way possible, because she was tired of me hearing my why. She goes, when are you going to ask for what? What was the purpose behind all of this? Because it has to be bigger than this. It can't be just you stuck in this bubble of why and staying there and not moving forward and seeing what this was for. There has to be a purpose behind it. And I understood it up here. It took a while to get here. And where I can see the purpose, I could see the why we were together and what brought this about, and to a degree, because that, again, I'm speculating. I'm adding details to the story that might not be there, but looking at it, when we got together and he brought me to this church, I started this deep, immense relationship with God. And it was amazing. And it was eye-opening. That's all I wanted to do, because I saw myself reflected in the stories there. I saw my struggles, my hurts, my wounds from the past. It took me a while to see what the purpose was, because there was this gap, and I'm still working through that gap. Trust, and we will always continue to work through this gap. Logically, I understood why he brought me to church. I got this new relationship, this fantastic relationship with the Creator. After the baptism, my podcast came, back because I had 2 iterations of my podcast, and now it's still living story, and it's building into this whole brand. I can't wait to see 5 years from now where it is and what it's doing. I just have to be patient with that process. That's another story. I also got a new position. I was promoted. I was given. And if you know my trajectory, I was a language arts teacher, English teacher, reading coach, literacy coach, all depends, instructional coach. It's like all the things for so many years with the word, with stories, with vocabulary words, with understanding the text. And that was my passion, has always been. If you could look at the books behind me, I applied for a business / computer / coding, HTML and CSS position. Now, mind you, I had very good scores with my students. My students excelled in my classroom. Very few students did not. Very few students did not, because of the passion and belief that I have in them. And my principal told me, when he told me he gave me that position, I was shocked, because for sure he was not going to give me that position. He just wasn't. And when he told me, I looked at him and I said, "Are you sure? Like, you're not playing with me. Wait, I need to record this because I need evidence that this conversation happened." He goes, "Yes, I'm giving you a chance at this." He goes, "I admire you. I value you. I respect you." And those are all words that I wish that person who brought me to church would have said. I felt so seen there in that moment with my principal, who I've worked with for 7 years, 8 years. And he gave me that position. That all happened after the baptism. And that all happened once I started to view and see my value, my worth, not only as a teacher, but as a person, as a human being. As I continued, I was able to have this relationship with God, understand his character, that he's not this smite you God, and that who I thought he was years past. That is the for what. And there's still so much more. There's more purpose to this, to that heartbreak, to that hurt, to that loss that I felt. I couldn't have gotten there, to that feeling, to that place of where peace and overwhelming love and these relationships now that surround me, that support me on my walk, the things that have unfolded with my podcast, with my writing, with my family. That's another thing. My family and I, it hasn't been great. It's never been great. And I can't blame them, because I was hurt. I carried my wounds outwardly, and I would be so angry because the world hurt me. And I would take that anger and that hurt and that pain, I would take it home. And the people who had to deal with it were the people closest to me. That's another factor that the Lord has healed in this process, because that hurt, that anger, that pain, those wounds, if I had not taken the step that I did last year, I would still continue to walk in that hurt and that pain. And that's, even though the relationship that brought me here broke me, it was the Lord who restored me, who took all of those pieces. And I don't know if you've ever heard of kintsugi. Yes. Took all of them.
Explain it though, just in case people who are listening don't.
Yes. So kintsugi is this process, and I can't remember if I think it's Japanese.
I think it's Japanese, yeah.
And they take this process where they take something that's broken, either like a broken plate, and they put it back together again. But they can't put it back together again the way that it was. What they do is they take those cracks and they glue everything together. They take those cracks and they fill it in with gold, which gives it's restored, but it's restored with something precious, something valuable. That gold is letting you know that even though it cannot be restored to what it once was, to its original manufactured brand, it is now made new, made valuable with the gold that has been filled in to close in those gaps, those cracks, those wounds. And that's what the Lord did for me with my heart, with all of those little gaps and scars from past relationships and past hurts and trauma and abuse and all of this. And it took my heart, started to fill in the gold. And the gold is his word. The gold is his promise. The gold is everything that he speaks to me in that word. When I sit with him, and when I spend those moments in devotional, or spend those moments just even like looking out the window, knowing how much he loves me, that he doesn't want me to suffer and have these wounds gaping, bleeding, and open. He wants them healed. He wants them filled with gold, and he wants me to give it to him.
I think That is such an important aspect, that we acknowledge that hurt people hurt people. And so often, before I went on this healing journey with God, I would look at those people hurting me. I was the victim of that hurt. And then God showed me, you don't have to stay in victimhood, because that is keeping you from becoming all that I want you to be. If you don't deal with the wound, like you said, now you're bleeding all over people. I unintentionally was hurting my kids. I unintentionally was hurting my marriage because I didn't have good ways of communicating or being able to talk through uncomfortable things. So that work that he did in me didn't stop with me, because as I was getting put back together, I was able to show up differently.
Yes.
We're always going to have an opportunity to heal.
Yes.
We live in a broken world with broken people all around us. And so we're going to get triggered. People are going to be mean to us. Even in the church, people will not show up in a way that maybe you need them to support you. And that can really hurt. And if we're always looking to everyone else other than Jesus, who is perfect and who can bring that healing, we're going to stay stuck in that place. One of the things you were sharing with me is about how your kids listen, your students listen to your podcast. And they're teaching back the things they're learned, which is so great, right? We want them to learn it and then to do the teach back method, right? That's how we learn.
Gosh.
So tell me about how you are now impacting others as you're sharing your story of healing, and you're teaching them how to be healthier in their own relationships.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, kids, I'm a middle school teacher. So where do I start? They're so curious. They're curious about their teachers, and it's different now. When we were kids, I didn't want to know my teacher's whole life. She was there to teach me, and if she's nice, great. If she's mean, okay, I'll endure. But kids nowadays, they want to know everything about you, so they start Googling you. And they found my podcast. Not that I announced it, not that I told them, go read my Substack or go check me out on Instagram. No, they found me on Google and they started spreading the word. And every year, I say nothing, and then the kids start searching. You have a podcast, Miss? And I was like, yes. What's it about? Oh my God, how many downloads do you have? And they're like so curious. Is it on YouTube? Do you do lives? And I was like, oh my God, all of the questions, which is great. And they take an interest, and then they start listening, and they will come. And this one specific student, I have several this year, but this one specific student who listened to my podcast over and over and over again, because she told me it motivated her. It made her get amped up before her softball games. And I'm like, my podcast, I'm like very calm and very soothing in terms of how I present my podcast episodes. And she's like, yeah, I love it. It amps me up. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, especially when you say take a pause. And I didn't know that was going to come back and bite me. So one particular day, and she's in 8th grade, kids were going absolutely nuts. Towards the end of the school year, they're riled up. They're ready to go. I'm ready to go. Everyone's ready to go. They were not listening. And at one point, and I hate screaming. I don't like screaming. I raised my voice an octave. And she goes to me, Miss Martinez, I think you need to take a pause. That's what you say on your podcast. We're going to take a pause right now. We're going to reflect on the question. And I was like, you lovely child of because she called me out.
And you're like, and yet you're right.
And she was so right, because I was about to lose it because no one was listening. And she said, I think you need to take a pause. You need to breathe and just exhale and figure out. Let's think about how can we do better in this moment? How can we figure this out? And I'm like, I said, I cannot believe I'm being coached by a 13-year-old at this moment.
I love it. But you had coached her up.
I did.
Had taught her through your podcast how to take that pause. And I love that. The work that I do, I work with women mostly in really hard transitions of life and trying to figure out, like, I do not like the life that I'm living, and how do I get to the one I'm dreaming of?
Right.
But what I have found as one of the most powerful tools is using curiosity. One, curiosity It's like the Bible talks about coming to me with childlike faith, right? We're just like no expectations. We're just trying to figure it out. Like she said, like, let's just figure it out. But when we choose curiosity, we automatically shift out of fight or flight. Like there's just something so calming about it when you're like, okay, I can figure this out. Let me just get curious about what's going on here. And then when we start asking questions, it gives us that pause that we need, right? Because where things, at least for me and a lot of the women that I work with, get offline and go in a direction that you don't want is when you're triggered. Because fight or flight kicks in. You stop thinking with your conscious brain and you start repeating what's just in your subconscious. What did you learn growing up? How did people respond? You're not responding from who you authentically want to be. You're responding from who you have been programmed to be, which is creating the life that you say you don't want. In order to do something different, you have to pause. And you have to figure out, what am I actually responding to in this moment? Which I love that she just like, what's actually going on? Which is such a good question, because then you can step back for a minute and maybe acknowledge, like you said, it's the end of the school year. We're all done. Like all of these things are going on. So how can I connect with them where they are, right? Not where I want them to be. Because that's never effective. I know when someone doesn't meet me where I'm at and they meet me where I should be, or normally it just makes me defensive or, you know, more resistant to what they're trying to say. So it's like when we can meet someone there and we can understand where they're coming from, we have all kinds of new solutions, tools, skills that become accessible to us. And that's what the Lord showed me in this. Ask, why are you so activated? What do I need in this moment? How do I move forward in alignment with who I want to be? And when we can do that over and over again and just take the very next step that comes to us, take a breath or whatever that is to meet ourselves in that space, we can move forward in alignment because we just re-engaged our conscious mind that controls our executive functioning and allows us to have access to so much more capacity. And I just love that the work you're doing is impacting the kids that you work with. All the listeners on your podcast, the people who get to read your books. And like you said, being willing to share the story, like the messy, hard middle that we all, especially as perfectionist people pleasers, high achievers. This conversation right here, I would never have done that 10 years ago. Probably not even 5. Because I was so worried about what would you think about me? Now, kind of similar to switching from the why question to what can I learn from this? What for? I'm like, I don't really care what you think because I'm not staying stuck and hidden in that dysfunction. Let's talk about it. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and the writing that you do so that people can go find you.
So the living story, aptly named, because the story is living. It's living inside of us. It's all about working through all of those things in life, those incidents, those situations, and understanding that the story is not over. It may feel like it's over at sometimes, that the world is crashing down, it's caving in, but it's not. There's someone that's actively writing that story, and that's the author. It's God, and he is not going to leave you on that page, in that season, in that situation, whatever it is, until either the lesson has been learned, until something has been processed, and it's to trust and honor the person that is in charge of our story, which is the Lord. And I share my experiences. I share tips and techniques on how to manage that. I'm in the series called I Never Got My Why, and What I Got Was Better. It's a 10-part series. Part 7 drops tomorrow in the morning. There's also reflection guides to help you through this process of this series. So if it's in the show notes and the links, you can access that. So you can take a look at your whys. Where are you stuck in the why? And how you can transition from that point to looking from another perspective, which is, what is this for? What is the purpose in this? And sometimes we can't see it right then in that moment. But when we take a look back and we reflect on the things that we've been through, you're able to see that. There's also stories about books that have been my absolute favorite, biblical stories that I can relate to, like Hagar, when she encounters the Lord in her desperation and she names him the God who sees, El Roy. When I read that, I was like, that is me. I am her, she is me. When I read about in Ruth, Naomi, her pain, her hurt. Of course, I want to be a Ruth, I want to be found. But Naomi, when in her pain, in her grief, she says, call me Mara, which means bitter. And I was like, I feel you. And then you see the loyalty that Ruth gives her. Your God is my God. I'm with you. I'm not leaving you. And God granted me people like that on this walk this year. So I'll talk more about that on the podcast. If you listen, you'll get some more of those stories. In my writing, it's on Substack. It's called Middle of the Story. And that came about because if you haven't gotten a drift, I love stories. I love books. I love dissecting and understanding the foundational parts of a story, how the character develops and transforms from this person to that person. And why I called it Middle of the Story is because we never get the characters page one. You never get a person when you're scrolling on Instagram or watching somebody's TikTok or short reel or video. You never get day one. You get middle of the story. You get them right then and there. And there is so much that has happened in the past that has developed and created the person that we are now, that it's kind of hard to understand them if you don't know the backstory, because you come in and at the middle. So when I write, it's usually at the middle. My latest essay was She Called Me Out, where a friend read and I usually write a piece at the end of the school year, just reflecting on things that I've learned. And what I learned was how the same compassion God has for us, I have for my students when they're struggling, when they're quiet, when they're super loud and active, and just giving them the compassion, the patience, the pause. to meet them where they're at. They're in the middle of their own story. I was called out. My friend said, well, where's that compassion for the men you date? I laughed because I was like, oh, wow, that's a call out for sure. The call out made me reflect. And in the past, old Tennille would have gotten mad, would have argued with her, like, where do you get off saying, blah, 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 blah. I am compassionate. I am defend. And I laughed it off. I did reflect because she's right. She's absolutely right. I had to reflect, why do I not show that compassion to them? And it made me reflect on the guy and what he's carrying as well, because I'm coming into the middle of his story too. I don't know what happened on page 1 or page 50. I'm coming right in the middle as I'm coming into his story. Same. He doesn't know my past. It made me reflect, like, I need to do a little better in this area, that I need to work on that. Now that it's pointed out, it's kind of hard not to see it because it's been brought up. And from that essay stemmed 2 more that are coming. I'm finishing up the writing on that, and that'll be on Substack soon. So, and if people want to connect with me, I am not consistent on Instagram. I do pop in, I do some stories, do the occasional live. Instagram at the Living Story Podcast.
And I will link everything in the show notes so it's easy for people to find. I love that you talk about we come into the middle of people's story, because comparison, it destroys, it steals, it's what the enemy wants to use to keep us stuck and incapacitate us from becoming who we were created to be. When we're always looking at other people and their stories and how it looks. And the thing that I know now, and as I sit here, and I was one of those people who was posting the perfect collated picture combination of my kids and, making life look a certain way. And so people were comparing themselves to something that wasn't even real.
Right.
And so I think it's so important. And that's why this podcast exists too. We don't just talk about like, just do this. Here's 3 steps to transform your life, because you need to be able to see backstory, the hard, the, hey, here's where you got it wrong, pointed out to us, God or friends that are safe people to help us learn and grow. And that is what makes I think this podcast so impactful, your podcast and your writing, it's that we just want you to know you're not alone. Like, this is the human experience. And for some reason, we all think we have to pretend. So today for me, as I walk away from this conversation, I think it's about being okay to sit in that messy middle. The chapter that you want over so badly is probably the chapter that if you sit there long enough, will transform your life into something you could have never imagined. And so let's not rush ourselves through healing because we miss out. And then, like you said, on that scab, like it just keeps opening up, and there's never really truly any healing because we didn't protect it. We didn't take care of it.
No.
We just kept pushing through and bumping it and then just bleed everywhere. So I hope that listeners, one, feel validated that wherever they're at in their story, it's not over, and that God has something so amazing if you will surrender the pen. Oh, I know it's hard, but I can promise you, when you do, you will begin to live the life that you always dreamed of.
Yes, because his plan is so much better than ours.
So much better. And friend, if you're sitting in that season of unanswered questions, grief, disappointment, or surrender, I hope that this conversation has encouraged you and inspired you to be willing to change the question you're asking and ask God, what does he want to do in this painful season, in this chapter that you wish you weren't writing, but trust God as he walks you through it to the other side. And remember that your story matters, your healing matters, and it's your story to tell. Thanks for being here.